Week 16 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I looked at off the wire this week. The first hitter, Lawrence Butler of the Oakland Athletics. I mentioned him last week after coming off that big 3-home run game for Lawrence Butler, and right now he's going out there and he's showing a lot of pop and one of the best hitters over the last few weeks in fantasy baseball. So right now available Butler in tons of fantasy leagues, but after this week, if he keeps it up, he's not going to be out there much. Available in 67% of leagues on the season. 9 home runs, 30 RBIs, 6 stolen bases, 21 runs scored, a 230 average, and a 297 on base. But over the last month of the season, he's really turned things around and get more of an opportunity. 7 home runs, 23 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 11 runs scored, a 304 average, and a 329 on base. In the last 2 weeks as well, 5 home runs, 18 RBIs, 7 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 412 average, and a 444 on base. A Butler showing power. He's got 3 games in a row with multiple hits, and he's doing a little bit of everything, being the leadoff hitter and catalyst for this A's lineup. July 12th at Philly, 1 for 1, a homer, 2 RBIs. July 13th at Philly, 0 for 3. July 14th at Philly, 3 for 6, 3 home runs, 6 RBIs, 3 runs scored. July 19th versus the Angels, 2 for 4, run, 2 RBIs. And July 28th versus the Angels, 3 for 4, 3 RBIs. Obviously, I don't think it's going to keep up at these crazy levels, but if he could be a decent guy, he could score runs, show some power, and steal a couple bases here and there, I think Butler for the remainder of the season can help fantasy owners. And this Oakland team, they're going out there and they're just having some fun, some of these players. Brent Rooker, he's been playing great of late. We've seen it now from Lawrence Butler. You got Gallo, Langelier. So they got some guys who actually going out there and playing good baseball is this Oakland Athletic team. And maybe they got some future pieces once they move to Las Vegas. Next hitter, speaking of the A's, is Max Schumann of the Oakland Athletics. So right now, second short in outfield, he qualifies as Schumann. Available in tons of leagues at 79%, but he's come up and he showed a decent skill set since he's been up. 6 home runs, 25 RBIs, 9 stolen bases, 41 runs scored, a 257 average, and a 349 on base. But over the last month of the season, 3 home runs, 14 RBIs, 5 stolen bases, 16 runs scored, a 317 average, and a 416 on base. So he's got a good eye at the plate, and then he's showing pop, and the versatility as well is always a major plus in fantasy baseball. July 12th at Philly, 1 for 3, 2 runs. July 13th at the Phillies, 0 for 4. July 14th at the Phillies, 2 for 4, 3 runs scored. July 19th versus the Angels, 3 for 4, a homer, 4 RBIs, 3 runs scored. At July 20th versus the Angels, 1 for 2, an RBI, and 2 runs scored. So I know he's batting 8th and 9th usually in this lineup here is Max Schumann. But like I said, he could play second short outfield, where we know second and short are weak positions. I know Jacob Wilson, the top prospect they just called up, but he's banged up already with a hamstring injury. But right now, I think he helped fantasy owners in a nice way here is Schumann, especially with the versatility, and he's producing, and he could give you a few categories: stolen bases, runs scored, and show some power at that second and shortstop eligibility position. So right now, I give Schumann an ad this week. The next hitter, Zach Neto of the Los Angeles Angels. So another lost season it's been for Los Angeles, but Neto, one of their top prospects last season, now coming up and through much last year, but this season has turned things around. On the year, 13 home runs, 44 RBIs, 16 stolen bases, 39 runs scored, a 258 average, and a 310 on base. But over the last couple weeks, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 6 runs scored, a 400 average, and a 471 on base. And Neto's gone out there and he's played well for this Angel team, where, like I mentioned, there's not much of a positive for them this season. July 12th versus Seattle, 1 for 4. July 13th versus Seattle, 0 for 2, a run. July 14th versus Seattle, 1 for 2, a run. July 19th at Oakland, 3 for 4, a homer, an RBI, 2 runs scored. And July 20th versus at Oakland, 1 for 3 with an RBI, 2 stolen bases. The stolen bases, runs scored, and some decent pop at a shortstop position, which isn't all that great. He's definitely a hitter I'd look to get this week. Next hitter, Mike Toglia of the Colorado Rockies. So Toglia, he's been on a power surge over the last few weeks here and getting an opportunity for the Rockies after he was a part-time player early in the season. On the year, 16 home runs, 34 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 28 runs scored, 201 average, and a 266 on base. 16 home runs for Toglia and 179 at-bats. Very impressive. In the last month of the season, that power's been real impressive. 10 home runs, 14 RBIs, 13 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 220 average, and a 298 on base. So he's showing major power. I know he had 3 home runs last week in a ball game versus the New York Mets, but he's getting the everyday opportunity. And this Rocky team as well They're 25 plus games under 500, and they're going to play the young guys and see what they got. Intaglia, former first round pick in the MLB draft a few years ago. July 12th at the Mets, 1 for 4, a homer, 2 RBIs. July 13th at the Mets, 0 for 4. July 14th at the Mets, 3 for 4, 3 home runs, 3 RBIs. July 19th versus the Giants, 1 for 3 with a run. And July 20th versus the Giants, 1 for 3. Intaglia, obviously, I don't think he's going to be hitting home runs at this crazy pace, but he's a switch hitter. He's got power to all fields, no doubt about it. And right now, if you're looking for some first base and outfield help, he qualifies at those positions and definitely worth an ad this week. The next hitter, Tyler Stevenson of the Cincinnati Reds. I mentioned Stevenson last week as an ad, and he's been on a power surge as well, available 74% of fantasy leagues here, Stevenson. So on the season, 11 home runs, 35 RBIs, 38 runs scored, a stolen base, a 243 average, and a 318 on base. But the last couple weeks here, like I said, that power surge, he's hit almost half his home runs in only 2 weeks compared to the first 14 weeks of the season. So the last couple weeks, 5 home runs, 9 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a 314 average, and a 368 on base. So Stevenson showing major power for the Cincinnati Red team, and we know he plays in a bandbox. And he showed some power in the past as well. July 13th versus the Marlins, 1 for 4 run. July 14th versus the Marlins, 1 for 3. July 19th at the Nats, 0 for 4. And July 20th at the Nats, 1 for 2 with a home run in that one. So like I said, 5 home runs in the last couple weeks. 5 home runs in the last 8 games as well, digging deeper for Stevenson. And right now, if you need catching help, and we know it's one of the weakest positions in fantasy baseball, he's definitely worth an ad this week. The next hitter, Jake Burger of the Miami Marlins. So Burger coming off a monster year with 34 home runs last year and 80 RBIs with a 250 average. And this year, obviously, in a weak Miami Marlin offense, teams are going to pitch him more carefully, even though he's starting to get things going over the last month of the year. On the year, 11 home runs, 37 RBIs, 32 runs scored, a 230 average, and a 271 on base. But the last 2 weeks, he's really picked it up as Burger, and he's definitely a candidate in the next 9 days as well to get traded off at the Major League trade deadline, because we know this Miami Marlin team, they're going to sell players off. Jazz Chisholm, most likely. Tanner Scott, Jake Burger is definitely a possibility. Any veteran or someone making decent money, I think, is a good possibility they get dealt from the Marlin team. So Burger qualifies at first and third base, and teams that need a slugger in the lineup, even at the DH position, might go out there and try to make a deal for him. July 13th at the Reds, 4 for 5, a homer, 4 RBIs, 2 runs scored. July 14th at the Reds, 1 for 4 run. July 19th versus the Mets, 2 for 4, a homer, 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored. And July 20th versus the Mets, 1 for 3. So right now, Jake Burger playing good baseball, only out there 55% of fantasy leagues. And like I said, if he gets traded to a contender, his numbers are going to go up even more, playing in a good lineup and having more protection to get better pitches to hit. The next hitter is his teammate Xavier Edwards of the Miami Marlins. So Tim Anderson, he got cut early July by this Marlin team. And Xavier Edwards, he was waiting in the wings. He qualifies at second and shortstop. And so far in a small sample size, he's shown he could swing the bat and swing it well. No home runs, 4 RBIs, 3 stolen bases, 7 runs scored, a 328 average, and a 406 on base. So right now, Edwards available in tons of fantasy leagues in 89%. And like I said, in shortstop eligibility is obviously good versatility at possibly 2 of the weakest positions in fantasy baseball. So Edwards getting the everyday opportunity. I know he's batting down in this Marlin lineup, but like I said, he's swinging the bat well. And the Marlin team, they're going to go with a complete youth movement, obviously, where they're going to trade most likely a Jazz Chisholm, a Tanner Scott, Jake Burger, possibly Josh Bell at the Major League trade deadline. July 13th at the Reds, 2 for 4. July 14th at the Reds, 2 for 3, a run, an RBI, 2 stolen bases. July 19th versus the Mets, 1 for 4, an RBI. And July 20th versus the Mets, 0 for 3. So right now, getting an everyday chance. Like I said, they cut the veteran Tim Anderson with this Marlin team to see what Edwards has. And right now, he's made the most of his opportunities. So in deeper leagues, I would give him an ad this week. And next hitter, Eugenio Suarez of the Arizona Diamondbacks. So Suarez, it was a slow start for him, but he's starting to pick things up. And this Diamondback team right now, right there for one of those last wild card spots, tied for the last spot on the season for Suarez. 10 home runs, 48 RBIs, 39 runs scored, 2 stolen bases, a 213 average, and a 299 on base. But the last month of the season, he's finally getting it going. 4 home runs, 17 RBIs, 13 runs scored, a 263 average, and a 364 on base. So Suarez last season, 22 and 96, very solid. with the Seattle Mariners. But the Mariners, they just wanted to get his contract off the payroll because they're in some payroll issues in Seattle, and Arizona picked him up and thought he was the final piece to possibly winning a World Series. And right now, like I said, the last couple weeks, he's turned it around. July 12th versus Toronto, 0-for-3 a run. July 13th versus Toronto, 2-for-5 a homer, 2 RBIs, 2 runs scored. July 14th versus Toronto, 2-for-3 a run, 2 RBIs. July 19th at the Cubs, 0-for-4, and July 20th at the Cubs, 1-for-4. So right now, he's definitely helped this Arizona Diamondback team where they've won 5 out of 6 ball games and starting to get things going to get one of those wild card spots and possibly get a chance to make a crazy run once again like they did last season. So Suarez right now, he's on a pace for about 18 to 20 home runs and 85-90 RBIs, I believe, when it's all said and done this season. And that'll be decent production. So right now, while he's picked things up over the last couple weeks here, he's definitely nailed this week. The next hitter, Juan Yepez of the Washington Nationals. So Juan Yepez, he had some decent times and showed flashes with the St. Louis Cardinals, but obviously it just hasn't happened over the last couple seasons. And then the Nationals picked him up on a minor league deal early in the season, and he hasn't been up in the major leagues where they had Joey Meneses, Joey Gallo at the first base position. But now with those guys, with Meneses sent down and Gallo hurt on the injury list, Yepez has come up and he's made the most of his opportunity in a small sample size. 1 home run, 6 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a stolen base, a .378 average, and a .451 on base. So Yepez qualifies at first in outfield. We've seen some power from him in the past, like I mentioned, with the Cardinals. But the last couple seasons over there in St. Louis, he went the other way and they cut him loose, and then the Nats picked him up on a minor league deal. July 13th at the Brewers, 2-for-4 a run. July 14th at the Brewers, 2-for-3 a run, an RBI, a stolen base. July 19th versus the Reds, 2-for-4 a homer, 3 RBIs, 2 runs scored. And July 20th versus the Reds, 1-for-4. So right now with this national team still hanging around a little bit, even though they're 4 games out of the wild card spot. Juan Yepez has been a bright spot for them, and they've actually won now, Washington, 4 out of 5 ball games where they're trying to make one more run, obviously, at a wild card spot, even though I don't see this Washington national team being a buyer at the major league trade deadline. But Juan Yepez, he's definitely been a good factor in this lineup, batting 3rd or 4th for the most part. Hitting the baseball well is Juan Yepez, and even if Joey Gallo comes back and Yepez keeps this up, I think they're going to keep him in this lineup as this Washington national team. So right now, while Yepez, possibly with the change of scenery and getting an opportunity with no pressure with Washington, is a good pickup available right now in tons of leagues at 75%. And the final hitter I looked at off the wire is Jose Iglesias of the New York Mets. So this New York Mets team, they're pretty much done and finished after May. But Jose Iglesias, ever since he's got called up, this Mets team's turned things around. And he's been a big factor and an influencer as well in that clubhouse and being together. And he's playing great baseball. 3 home runs, 16 RBIs, 2 stolen bases, 15 runs scored, a .384 average, and a .424 on base. And over the last couple weeks, 2 home runs, 4 RBIs, 7 runs scored, a stolen base, a .500 average, and a .552 on base. And right now available 95% of fantasy leagues. Iglesias, he's been bouncing around the minor league systems over the last few seasons with the Rockies, Boston Red Sox, Detroit Tigers, and even with this Met team, he wasn't up until June. But he's helped this Met team turn things around with his clubhouse. His leadership as a veteran as well. So right now, Jose Iglesias, pretty much he's been playing almost every day of late for this Met team. With the injury to Starlin Marte, they've had Jeff McNeil in the outfield switching off. And Iglesias either playing third at times or second base, and he's got good versatility. So right now, while he's hitting the baseball great, even though I don't believe it's going to hold up, he's definitely someone to add this week. July 12th versus the Rockies, 2-for-4. 2 homers, 2 RBIs. July 14th versus the Rockies, 4-for-4, 2 runs scored. July 19th at the Marlins, 1-for-3 a run. And July 20th at the Marlins, 2-for-4 stolen base. So batting average is what Iglesias is bringing fantasy owners. And someone to add this week. So that's a few hitters I looked at off the wire right now for Week 16 of the fantasy baseball season.